Hello, this is BBC World News. I'm Ben Bland. Our top stories. Spain's Prime Minister begins to impose direct rule over Catalonia after the regional parliament in Barcelona declares independence.
I'm informing you that as of today, I have dissolved the Catalonian parliament, and on 21st December there will be autonomic elections for that autonomic community.
Talking tough in Seoul, the US Defense Secretary James Mattis warns that America will never accept a nuclear North Korea. The children caught up in the Syrian conflict at risk of severe malnutrition after a 4-year-long siege. And the Astros open up a lead in baseball's World Series, sliding past the Dodgers in Houston. Hello and welcome to BBC World News. The Spanish Prime Minister has sacked the Catalan government's leaders, dissolved its parliament and ordered early elections. It's all in response to the region's unilateral declaration of independence. Mariano Rajoy, who has imposed direct rule from Madrid, said most Catalans did not support breaking away. Andrew Plant has the latest.
The streets of Barcelona, Catalonia's capital, where crowds have been celebrating through the night after the regional government here declared its independence from Spain.
Every citizen is clear about the goal. The price that we will pay, perhaps it's expensive, but here we do things well. We work well. We respect everybody.
This was the moment Catalonia's government voted to declare itself independent state. "300 miles away in Madrid, Spain's national government also voting to take away Catalonia's regional powers and sack its leader after refusing to recognize Catalonia's independence.
Normality starts with law. In order to return institutional legitimacy and to give a voice to all Catalans, I have now dissolved the Catalan parliament in order to hold regional elections on the 21st of December.
It's a confusing picture. Even within Catalonia itself, many people don't want to be separate from Spain. The Spanish government says it will now take back control. But how will that work? And what about the tens of thousands of Catalonian people today who believe they're already living in a separate state, one they would argue Spain no longer has any power to control? Andrew Plant, BBC News.
And you can find more on the situation in Catalonia, including information on how the crisis began. That's all on our website, bbc.com/news. Or you can also find all of that if you download the BBC News app. The US Defense Secretary James Mattis has said that the US will never accept a nuclear North Korea. He was speaking after defense talks with South Korean officials in Seoul. General Mattis warned that Pyongyang's nuclear and missiles programs would undermine and not strengthen its security.
Diplomacy remains our preferred course of action, but as I have repeatedly emphasized, our diplomats are most effective when backed by credible military force in this sort of situation. Make no mistake, any attack on the United States or our allies will be defeated. Any use of nuclear weapons by the North will be met with a massive military response, effective and overwhelming.
A short while ago, I spoke to our correspondent, Mark Lowen, who's in Seoul. I asked him whether, unlike President Trump, General Mattis is adopting a more conciliatory tone.
Yeah, and I think that's considerably more emollient, perhaps, than President Trump, of course, in the last few weeks and months, who has threatened to unleash fire and fury on North Korea to totally destroy the North. He said, rather enigmatically, that only one option was left and could work with North Korea, that diplomacy would not work. And that is widely perceived here and in other parts of the world and other South Korea's allies to be potentially exacerbating an already fraught situation, the high tension on the Korean Peninsula. Of course, North Korea had its 6th nuclear test recently. It fired 2 intercontinental ballistic missiles in July, so tension is already high. And then with this kind of bombastic rhetoric from the White House, it seems to be inflaming things. So what General Mattis seems to be doing is to try to say, look, we're going to stand very firm, we're not going to accept a fully nuclear-armed North Korea, but not to shut the door to diplomacy either. And I think that is very much the message that the government here in Seoul will try to get President Trump to echo when he visits in about 10 days.
And of course, all eyes will be on that visit. It's not far off now, President Trump himself there. And I suppose to an extent, the Defence Secretary there preparing the ground before President Trump arrives.
Yeah, President Trump will be here for a day and a half or so. It's part of a 5-day tour of Asia that includes China, Japan, the Philippines and Vietnam as well. And yeah, what sort of tone will President Trump strike after this kind of bellicose exchange with North Korea? Pyongyang said that his rhetoric of late was amounted to a declaration of war. Will President Trump row back from that somewhat, or will he maintain the pressure? Of course, the fear is that North Korea is edging towards the miniaturization of a nuclear warhead, which would fit on top of or inside an intercontinental ballistic missile, and therefore could strike the US mainland with a nuclear weapon. The US has said that would not be acceptable. It's widely believed among North Korea watchers that North Korea is just perhaps months away from achieving that kind of technological advance. If it does so, then North Korea would be in effect a fully nuclear-armed state. What would the response then be of the US? Would there be a preventative strike? All options on the table. Huge tension here, and all eyes to see exactly how President Trump will respond and what kind of rhetoric he'll be using during that visit in 10 days' time.
So our correspondent Mark Lowen there reporting from Seoul. I just want to take you back to our top story. I was telling you a moment ago how the Spanish Prime Minister has sacked the Catalan government's leaders, dissolved the parliament and called for early elections. Let's get an assessment of how that's going down on the ground. My colleague Tim Wilcox has been following every development in the Catalan independence crisis. He's there live in Barcelona. Tim, has there been any sort of reaction to this move by the Spanish Prime Minister yet?
Not yet on the ground. I mean, a lot of Spaniards, a lot of people here in Barcelona were partying late into the night. Obviously, those who voted for independence back on that October the 1st referendum. I think it's a waiting game now. We were speaking to some very senior members of the administration here, and they felt relieved, actually, that there'd been no intervention immediately from Madrid after the declaration of independence. I think their feeling is that the longer they can go without anything happening on the ground, either state police moving in or any arrests made, the better chance they have of making this autonomous region work.
In some ways, the Spanish Prime Minister had found himself in a position where he had almost no choice but to take the step, because he threatened to do it in the hope that that would be enough to dissuade the Declaration of Independence, and it didn't work, so he had to follow through.
Well, in the eyes of Spain, this entire process has been unconstitutional and illegal right from the time when the Catalan government decided to hold a referendum, then introduced a Catalan law saying that if the referendum was supported with a majority, it would be binding, would have to go to a vote in the Catalan parliament. That whole process, according to Madrid, is irrelevant. This is unconstitutional, it is illegal, it is threatening the sovereignty of the Spanish state, and that is why they came in so hard on October the 1st when the National Police, Policía Nacional and the Guardia Civil were sent up here to stop that referendum going ahead. But the independentistas and the separatists would say, look, everything that Madrid told us we couldn't do, we have done, and we're still here.
Tim, you and I were both on air yesterday, Friday, when the Declaration of Independence was made and then the response from the Spanish government. And very quickly there was a succession of reaction from other countries, the UK, the US, France, Germany, all saying they didn't recognise this Declaration of Independence. Do you get any sense on the ground there that people are bothered by that at all?
Well, again, you know, I've been speaking to the hard-line separatists. They are saying, wait. Let's wait and see who does eventually have to recognize us, because we will become such a problem for Europe, for example, if people don't. What about the debt here? You've got 72 billion euros worth of debt. What about the national debt of Spain? Who's going to pay that? If the markets get spooked, if the economy suffers, Europe will have to intervene and speak to Mariano Rajoy, and say, you've got to resolve this. But they're also, they think, telling Mr. Rajoy, don't go in too hard. We don't want to have scenes like we saw on October the 1st, when the national police officers were seen pulling voters and people guarding the polling stations by their hair from those areas.
And Tim, any key things scheduled for today or over the weekend, or is it just watchful waiting for now?
Yeah. Well, there'll probably be demonstrations, certainly pro-independence. We're expecting a pro-unity demonstration tomorrow. Carles Puigdemont, the Catalan president, having had a meeting last night, apparently with some 25 people, discussing with members there what needs to happen next, probably some appointments, but basically the view from Barcelona, the view from the separatist camp is, we want to show that we are a functioning autonomous region, our own government. Nothing has changed. They're appealing for calm. They have no army. They have no treasury as such at the moment. But they're trying to make sure that the world understands that they're in control. There is no violence on the streets, and that they will continue as they have been, but now as the world's newest state.
Okay, Tim, for the moment, thanks very much. Tim Wilcox there for us, live in Barcelona. Well, let's turn our attention to Syria now, where millions of civilians remain caught up in the conflict. This week, the United Nations highlighted the humanitarian crisis affecting almost 400,000 people in an eastern suburb of Damascus, describing the conditions there as an outrage. The area of eastern Ghouta is the last part of the Syrian capital under siege by the government. There's been an increase in military attacks, and earlier this week UNICEF said almost 1,200 children were suffering from malnutrition. Our Middle East correspondent Lina Sinjab reports from Beirut.
The main meal of the day. Few spoons of yogurt and 2 loaves of bread. Feeding a family of 7 is a daily struggle. The mother, who's covering her face for safety, says that's all she can afford for the day. The kids keep saying they're hungry, she says. My heart is broken. There's nothing I can do. This is 7-year-old Mustafa. He's the most in need of food in the family. Weighing only 10 kilos, he, like hundreds of children in besieged eastern Ghouta, is malnourished. Abir, his elder sister, can't even go to school.
I'm 10 years old and I'm in year 1. I should be in year 4. We can't eat or drink, and we tell Mum day and night that we're hungry.
Our situation is very bad. My father doesn't have the money. My brother Mustafa was well and had chubby hands. Now he's very thin. Night and day we say we are hungry. My mom says, God helps us. We don't have the money to bring you food.
This is the main reason behind their suffering. The war grinds on. Government warplanes continue to target eastern Ghouta. There are at least 350,000 civilians still trapped there and in need of food. The area has been under siege for 4 years. This was the last aid convoy to enter the area last month, and it's hard to tell when the next one will come. These children are not in hospital because they are injured, but because they are malnourished. The UN says there are over 1,200 children suffering in eastern Ghouta, and the numbers are rising.
Many children are fainting, suffering headaches, blurred vision, depression, all because of a lack of essential food. We can only help so many. We don't have the medicines.
Mustafa and his siblings are trying to live a normal life, but with the siege continuing, he is unlikely to recover soon. Lina Sajjad, BBC News, Beirut.
Stay with us here on BBC World News. Still to come, we'll have a special report from Sudan on how the country is hoping to re-establish itself after years of sanctions.